wanted to go over that helped me along the way. First thing is kerning. It's kind of a subtle thing, but a thing that I think ends up helping your design just look a little more crisp. It's basically these little spaces that happens between text, and it's bringing them in where you need to bring them in. A lot of it happens using InDesign, and InDesign has tools to kind of help you adjust it fairly easily. It's just using your eye most of the time. And so, I don't know if you can tell, but there's just a little bit of a difference that helps the text pop better. Another tip is leading. A lot of times, sometimes aesthetically people like a lot of leading, but generally speaking, it's not ideal for reading, unless it's just like for a little bit, not the entire program. And then sometimes people too don't put enough leading because maybe they just want a lot of text, and they're like, oh, I just cram it in there, we'll make it all fit. And so, but you wanted a certain size that's legible, but then once you start changing the leading, you can't read anything. So the general rule is, often speaking, if your text is size 10, you do maybe like leading of 12, but it all kind of varies on your font.
So we get around hole number 9. Vicki Trossel is always the first person up on the tee for 17 years. We're not into change. We're doing this way. Vicki always gets up on hole number 9, puts her ball down. Now it's the tee, the 30-yard swamp, and the green. She looks back at Ann and Shar and me, and she says, I really like going first. And the reason I really like going first is because I always hit the ball in the water, and then I can just take an 8, and then I can go in and order breakfast, and then I get out of here quicker, and I get back to work, and then I don't have as much problems at the office as you guys do. So then we look at her, and we always say, hey, Vic, come on, you got a great swing. You can do this. You could probably birdie this hole. Your swing is so good. Let's think about birdieing the hole. And that's the little teamwork, collaborative kind of communication where we're supporting her from the back. And then good old Vicki is up on hole number 9. She says this, oh, all right, but I told you guys I always hit the ball in the water. Then she stops. She goes, and it's for 17 years. I can't believe I make this mistake every single Tuesday morning this summer. I always put down a good ball. So she picks up her good Titleist, goes back to her bag, gets a Max Fly with 8,000 cuts on it, puts it down on the tee, and she says, as long as I'm going to lose a ball, I might as well lose this Max Fly. Then I love the last thing she says. She turns back to us, and she says this, watch how big the splash is.
And so when you think about this idea of teaching, you think about, it's my responsibility to give them information. When you think about facilitating learning, is to ensure that students understand, grasp, are able to somehow use the information that I give them in a way that can make a difference in their lives or in the domain in which they're trying to apply the knowledge. So teaching is very different than facilitating learning. But one of the things that struck me was we spent a lot of time talking about learning and talking about the learners, but I saw very little attention being given to the context in which the learning took place, or the learning takes place, and very little consideration about, so who are the people who facilitate the learning and what condition do they need to be in order to make the difference that we say we want to make. And so for me, I began to think about that maybe the first imperative may be for us to reconsider the way that we lead in order to then reconsider the way that we facilitate learning.
And in a 2002 study by the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, estimates that approximately 1,400 college students between the ages of 18 and 24 die annually as a result of alcohol poisoning. And so for over a generation, we have known that youth typically began to use alcohol even prior to them even coming to campus. We're seeing younger and younger rates of students who are using in middle school and high school, so they're getting their experiences young. But what we also do know, and research does indicate, is that when they come to college, this can change for those students that maybe didn't have those experiences in high school, but also those first few weeks that they are in college can also project what their use patterns will be for their 4 years in college. So that's pretty serious. So as a recreation program, if you're looking at how to program or how to have services or to interact with those students the first few weeks that they're in college, you might have an impact on how they drink for the next 4 or 5 years of their college experience.
Basically, part of the concept when we started RecWorks was because when we first moved into our facility, which was back in 2001, we had a number of students who moved with us. So it was easy for them to invest in the whole concept of this new 82,000 square foot facility that had an elevated track and 4 basketball courts and a fitness room that was 11,000 square feet and many other concepts. So they bought into it. I mean, if somebody had a piece of gum in their mouth, they were like, I'm sorry, you can't have that piece of gum. They enforced our policies willingly because they knew that it belonged to them. They knew that their money was going to that, and they wanted it to be special. And if somebody didn't appreciate that, then they let them know about it. Well, eventually, as time went on, things started to kind of falter. We didn't have students who would invest in that. They didn't really get it. They didn't understand that, telling somebody that they needed to have a talent or fitness room was important, not only to policy's sake or for maintenance reasons, but for safety. And so we had to really work hard to help these students understand, and they still weren't getting it. And so finally I was like, what do we need to do? And I went to a workshop, and it was a Disney presentation. And during that presentation I was like, okay, Disney understands customer service. They really get this. What do we need to do now? I'm not Disney. I mean, and there's no way I'm going to hire cast members and things like Disney talks about. But we ought to be able to take some of these concepts and implement it into a RecWorks program. And so that's what we did.
You got to keep in mind, folks, not everybody wants to be a director. I hope after 22 years in the profession, I've really become comfortable with, as our speaker talked about last night, servant leadership. I think so many of us in middle management are that type of leader. We just want to serve, and there are many opportunities to do that. So it's okay if you have somebody that's been at the same job for 22 years in middle management, isn't it? That is okay, isn't it? Okay, good. I don't want to feel like a total failure in the field here. But just please keep that concept in mind. Now, there are also many layers of middle, so we'll see if we get a link on this one or not, and if not, I'll just describe it, because you can certainly see this in the rec sports area. So, for instance, we've got associate directors, we've got senior associate directors, we've got assistant directors, we have coordinators, we have supervisors. We love titles in higher education, don't we, and in rec sports in particular. So if that's not coming up, picture these layers of all these associate, assistant, coordinators, supervisors. They're in intramurals, in sport clubs, in administration, customer service, facility management, aquatics. Folks, the middle is not one step. It's many layers of steps and many different jobs, areas you can take as we look along this path toward advancing.